بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على نبينا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. We'll continue inshallah on the weekends with the tafsir of Surah Az-Zukhruf, which we began last weekend, both Saturday and Sunday. We recited up to ayah number 19 from the surah. As a quick reminder before we continue, Surah Az-Zukhruf exists within a cluster of surahs called Al-Hawamim. It starts with Ghafir and it ends with Al-Ahqaf. All these surahs start with Qawli Ta'ala, Hamim. And all these surahs have a similar theme. And most surahs that begin with these broken letters or separated letters all have similar themes. The ones that have the same separated letters at the beginning of it. It's almost like it's coding for these surahs. And the more you look into it, the more you'll see it, inshallah, within the surahs. And these surahs give advice of things to do and things not to do on the way of da'wah, the way of serving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's deen. Surah Az-Zukhruf is amongst the three surahs at the end that give three warnings. Surah Az-Zukhruf gives a warning regarding the exact word itself, or the concept of the word itself. And Zukhruf is everything that seems shiny and beautiful on the outside, but has no substance and has no real value, and how that can affect people's judgment. And it talks about the unidimensional materialistic approach to the world, and how having that type of perspective and worldview and that judgment can be extremely problematic and is the reason for a lot of the evil or the bad decision making that occurs in the world from every party. And we talked a little bit about that in the tafsir of the first 19 verses. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave a few examples, and one of them, which we talked about on Sunday, was that unidimensional approach to women that existed back in Jahiliyyah, where they were only valued, where people were only valuable based on what financial benefit they brought the tribe. And if they weren't going to bring financial benefit, if they weren't going to increase the number of warriors, or they weren't able to, then they had no value, and women were devalued based on that. And that's what, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala pointed it out as one of إِذَا بُشِّرَ أَحَدُهُمْ بِمَا ضَرَبَ لِلرَّحْمَنِ مَثَلًا ظَلَّ وَجْهُهُ مُسْوَدًّا وَهُوَ كَظِيمٌ وَمَن يُنَشَّأُ فِي الْحِلْيَةِ. And it talks about how this is a deficit and a problem in their way of thought. And this is one of the issues that the Quran definitely changed in terms of the mentality of those who followed it during that period. Meaning, if you were to meet a Muslim back in the era of the Prophet ﷺ, then one of the distinguishing features of this individual would be their understanding and their concept of how females should be treated within a society, because it was different. It was different from all the other surrounding ways of thought that people adopted within their lives. It's very sad to see how little we have, or how much we have regressed as an ummah regarding this topic that the Prophet ﷺ, the Muslims were so progressive about back during their time, because people, and if you really want to know more about the topic, just actually study the history of women's rights throughout the world. Maybe just go across the globe and look at how long it took for certain concepts or for certain understandings to exist in Europe and parts of Africa and Asia, and even in the Middle East, and see how, and at the same time that certain struggles existed in the world. What the Prophet ﷺ was telling people in terms of their rights, of equal rights, in terms of their right to believe and right to learn and right to give an opinion and to vote and to participate, their equal rights, their rights to inherit and the rights to own and the rights for business, and the fact that they had equal responsibility in terms of the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Their taklif is the same, they're mukallaf just like you are, and they're going to be held accountable at the same degree. For you and I right now today, this is a given. We don't really think much, but it wasn't a given back then. And this ayat we talked about last time is a very good example of how they viewed things. They were not seen as equal to men at the time, and the reason was because of this materialistic approach to the world. And of course, there are many other mistakes that were made that are similar. And today, inshallah, we'll continue, and we'll point out Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala points out a few more problems that existed during that time, and approaches that were the result of this very, very narrow-minded, unidimensional approach to the world, and And we have the same problem here today, and that's why I chose Surah Az-Zukhruf, quite honestly. Even though it's a little bit of a longer surah than I would usually choose for weekend mornings in Ramadan. But the reason I chose it is because really we have very similar problems. We're living in a time where we are being basically ruled and run by a consumerism culture that is so powerful, that is literally changing the way it's framing mindsets for people. And I see it a lot in the youth, and the way that they talk and what they hope for and what they want and what they fear and how they define success and how they define. And it's just very disturbing, because I feel like I'm spending a lot of time talking about things that I don't think, or in my opinion, I never thought I was going to need to talk about. I never thought I was going to have to explain that, their fathers, the fact that your dad doesn't have like 1 million followers on YouTube doesn't mean that he didn't make it, he's still a solid dude. He still worked really hard, and he's holding on to a family. You understand? He held on to a family. He didn't kill you growing up. That is kudos for your dad for doing that. That's a big deal. It's hard because the way that everything is defined today is so materialistic. It's really based on wealth, and it's based on fame, and those are not good. They're just not good markers to define success. They just aren't. And you can disagree with me if you like, but whatever. It never was. And for it to become the only way to define it is forget about it actually being a way to define it. For it to be the only way to define success and define advancement in the world and actually carrying weight and value is a musibah. It's like a musibah. And Surah Az-Zukhruf really points that out well, in a lot of depth. And that's the beauty of the Quran. If you just read long enough, you'll find the Quran is addressing problem. It'll address the problem that you're struggling with, literally, head on, very clearly. We'll leave nothing for you to really wonder about or contemplate outside of what it explained. So we'll start inshallah with ayah number 20. I'll just read them for the barakah of the recitation, and you can follow along if you have a phone or a Quran in your hand, and I'll explain inshallah the meanings. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وقالوا لو شاء الرحمن ما عبدناهم ما لهم بذلك من علم إن هم إلا يخرصون أم آتيناهم كتابا من قبله فهم به مستمسكون بل قالوا إنا وجدنا آباءنا على أمة وإنا على آثارهم مهتدون وكذلك ما أرسلنا من قبلك في قرية من نذير إلا قال مترفوها إنا وجدنا آباءنا على أمة وإنا على آثارهم مقتدون قال أولو جئتكم بأهدى مما وجدتم عليه آباءكم قالوا إنا بما أرسلتم به كافرون فانتقمنا منهم فانظر كيف كان عاقبة المكذبين وقالوا لو شاء الرحمن ما عبدناه. And they said, if the Rahman wanted, they're speaking of Allah, and that's how they would, and this is a good way for them to describe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in contrast to all of the other gods that they worship that bring them financial benefit. They said that if the God in the heavens didn't want us to worship all these other gods, then we wouldn't have. What are they saying? It is the long-lasting argument of Jabriya. Meaning, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted something to happen, it would have happened. If He wanted us to be good, we wouldn't have been good. If He wanted us to do something, we would have done it. The fact that we're not doing it, that means Allah didn't want us to do it. The most ridiculous argument that exists. Why? Because it's extremely unidimensional. And it's based on a false understanding, a very materialistic understanding of how the world works. The fact that you can't understand the fact that someone can't understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is capable of creating a creature that has free will to do whatever it wants, whatever it pleases, within the limitations of its abilities, within Allah's creation. And even though it can do that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala it knows about what it's doing, it does not it is not a threat to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in any way. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not oblivious to anything it is doing. That is a problem. They can't seem to understand that. That's just not understandable. Why? Because if you have a materialistic outlook, you can only judge things based on your simple experience of it. Meaning, when they talk about jabr, meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He knows. Well, if He knows, that means I don't have choice. If He knows what I'm going to do next, then how could I possibly have choice? This is the argument they're saying here. This is the old argument. وَقَالُوا لَوْ شَاءَ الرَّحْمَنُ مَا عَبَدْنَاهُم. He controls us all, so if He wants us not to do it, He wouldn't have done it. مَا لَهُم بِذَلِكَ مِنْ عِلْمٍ. They have no knowledge of what they're speaking of. إِنْهُمْ إِلَّا يَخْرُصُونَ. They're just making assumptions. They're just الخرص وحزر ما على النخل من الرطب. Al-khars is an activity that farmers would do, is when they estimate how much tamar is on a tree before it's actually ready. It's called khars because it's just you're just throwing you're taking a look and saying, I think there's this much. And then they would do that for all the trees, and then based on that they would pay the owner of the land up front, and then they would wait for the actual tamar to become ripe, and then daman. We used to call back at home. This is what they used to do. It's very simple. But it's khars, meaning it does not based on knowledge. You didn't really count them one by one. You don't know what you're talking about. It's just an estimation, and that's what the ayah is saying. Yakhrusun. They're just making this as they go along. But the problem comes down to, just so it's clear of this issue that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pointing out, that yes, if it won't make sense to you if you're going to judge this materialistically, meaning based on your experience. You see, I can't know the future unless whatever is behaving according to an algorithm that was predetermined by myself or someone else, something that I was able to figure out. It's the simple example of that little car that you kind of wind, and then you put on a flat surface, and you direct towards the pillar, and you say, this car in the future is going to slam right into and you let it go, and it just goes right into it because it has no choice. That's the only way you can actually know the future. Even when we use greater tools to predict human behavior on a lot larger scale, individual or communities, it's still just estimations. We're never sure, and then human beings always succeed in breaking all the rules and changing the graph and doing something that no one thought was going to happen, and then you're stuck with this new reality that was so unclear. And COVID was a great example of that. We all got used to it, that no one knows what they're talking about. Like somewhere midway COVID, we stopped listening. They have no idea what they're saying. They're just making this up. All these graphs are completely meaningless. COVID actually affected all of us in terms of our trust, not only in the medical system, but in the government's ability to manage a crisis and to actually use data to predict the future. We thought they were much better than that, didn't we? We thought we were way more advanced than we actually turned out to be, because for 2 years, this charade went on for 2 full years, and I don't even know if we're going to see another lockdown. This is just ridiculous. This is not. Your life shouldn't be lived like this. Alhamdulillah, we will continue to follow the rules and keep people safe. But there's a lot of questions that people have, and they're legitimate. But the only way we can actually know the future is if whatever's behaving is following an algorithm and it has no choice. And that's the materialistic way to actually judge knowing the future. The question is, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says He knows the future, and He does, Jalla Jalalullah, well, the question is, how does He know it? Does He know it the same way? If your answer is yes, then what they said is correct. لَوْ شَاءَ الرَّحْمَنُ مَا عَبَدْنَاهُم. It's really up to Him. He controls everything. We don't have really any choice in any of this. So why are you holding me accountable to something Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew that I was going to do? If He wanted, He would have changed it. But that's not how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows things. That's not the nature of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's knowledge. He knows what you're going to do, even though you have full freedom of choice. That's why He's God, and that's why we're not. This is the point of difference. If you're looking for the difference, well, that's where it is right there. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what you're going to do next, even though you have full control. I can give it to you in a different way, just in case you think about this topic and it just sticks with you, have no idea. But some people just cannot seem to get over this one. But again, the reason that I think that this issue is something that people struggle with is because we fail to see the world outside of this one dimension of materialistic methodology of critical thinking. And there's more to it than that. There's way more to it than that. And And this is what Surah Az-Zukhruf tried to point out. But let me give you an example of a way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would know exactly. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, let's put it this way. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows, let's say that you ever heard the theory of the multiverse. I don't know if you've heard this. Or parallel universes, where every possibility exists. There's an infinite number of universes with an infinite number of versions of you doing infinite number of things. Well, let's just say that's the case, and it's not, but just for the purpose of this argument, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows about all of them. So basically, Jalla Jalalullah, He knows exactly all the different options that are available. At this moment, He knows exactly all the different infinite options of what I could do at this moment. I could do anything at this moment. I could completely surprise you and do something insane. Correct? You have no way to control it. You have no way to predict it, really. Based on algorithms, most likely I'm going to sit here, I'm going to hold the Quran in my left hand, I'm going to continue to talk until you get bored, and then I'm going to notice that you're bored, and I'll say Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam Muhammad, then we'll leave. Most likely that's how this is going to happen. But Allahu A'lam, you have no way to actually predict that. But all of the different infinite options of what can happen is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows about. And you're just choosing which option you want every time. The options are all there. He sees them all subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you cannot surprise Him by doing something that's outside of these infinite number of options. You're just choosing which one you want. There. Same thing. What's the difference between that and between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knowing what you're going to do next? There's no difference. There is no difference really. But if we are adamant on understanding the world in a very unidimensional manner, with only just one measurement of how things are going to work, then yes, the answer of وَقَالُوا لَوْ شَاءَ الرَّحْمَنُ مَا عَبَدْنَاهُم would work. But it doesn't. مَا لَهُمْ بِذَلِكَ مِنْ عِلْمٍ. He's very clear subhanahu wa ta'ala. They have no knowledge of this. They have no idea what they're talking about. This is not true. إِنْهُمْ إِلَّا يَخْرُصُونَ. They're just saying whatever comes to their mind. جَلَّ جَلَالُ اللَّهِ أَمْ آتَيْنَاهُمْ كِتَابًا. Are they saying this based on a book that we gave them? مِنْ قَبْلِهِ. Did they have some book that I sent saying that this is how it is, that I force everyone, or that the fact that I know means that they have no choice? فَهُمْ بِهِ مُسْتَمْسِكُونَ. And they're holding on to that knowledge very clearly? Or where is this coming from? Based on what are you saying this? And the reason that you feel this heavy tone is because one of the biggest dhunub that a human being can possibly perform is أن نقول على الله غير الحق. To speak something on behalf of God that is not the truth, or we do not have knowledge of. Which makes what I do extremely, extremely dangerous. Extremely dangerous. Every time you sit and you open the Quran and you start speaking, I'm interpreting this on behalf of God. I'm trying to tell you what He's saying. So the mistake that I make not about ending my career, it's about ending my akhirah. It's a huge risk. It's very khatar. All my life growing up, this was something that was pounded into my brain. You have to be very careful in terms of what you're saying, and why you're saying it, and how you're saying it, and think 100 times before you say something, and make sure, because when you say it, when it's out there, you can't take it back again. And if it was incorrect and someone learns it and goes and practices it, it is on you, and you cannot control that ever again. And you're speaking on behalf of God. And if you speak on behalf of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you don't say what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted you to say, and you're not explaining it the way He intended it to be explained, or somehow you allow your ego and agenda to enter that explanation, and you're saying something and trying to benefit for yourself, then it's game over. Then that's the worst form of corruption that could ever exist. That's why there's a little bit of a heavy tone. أَمْ كِتَابًا مِنْ قَبْلِهِ فَهُمْ بِهِ مُسْتَمْسِكُونَ. They have a book and it says exactly what they're saying right here. That better be the case. They seem to be very certain about asking this. Saying that لَوْ شَاءَ الرَّحْمَنُ مَا عَبَدْنَاهُم. That's what you're saying? You're saying if God didn't want me to, you're making a statement on behalf of God, saying that if He didn't want something, He didn't want you to behave in a certain way, you wouldn't have behaved. That's how you're going to go by it? Where did you get this from? Where's the book that says that? Show me. You don't have a book. Then how are you, based on what are you making this claim? What do you say to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yawm al-qiyamah when He says, where do you get this claim from? How are you speaking on my behalf? Did I allow you to speak on my behalf? Who gave you the permission to speak on me? The known hadith when somebody, this hadith in Bukhari, Muslim, and Ahmad, in the Tirmidhi, and the Prophet ﷺ was hearing somebody, or the hadith goes as follows, as someone was being talked about, someone who had performed a lot of dhunub, and another person who heard about this, قال لا يغفر الله له. This person will never be forgiven. فيقول الرب, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls upon him in the skies, من هذا الذي يتأول عليه? Who's speaking on my behalf? ألا أغفر, that I won't forgive. ألا فاشهدوا أني قد غفرت لعبدي وزججت بعبدي الآخر في النار. then be my witness that I've forgiven him, and the other one will be punished for it. Based on what? What are you doing? What do you mean fulan won't be forgiven? There's a big difference between reciting an ayah in the Quran that gives a statement for us to warn ourselves and others with, and then using the Quran as a catalog. I've talked about this a number of times in the past, and I think it's worth always repeating because it's a big problem. When we generalize, when we say, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَغْفِرُ أَن يُشْرَكَ بِهِ, meaning that every mushrik will not be forgiven. So I go and look at a number of mushrikeen and I say they won't go to. No, there's a big difference. The law of logic, these logical laws don't apply here. For you to say, well, every mushrik will enter nar. Huh? That's what the Quran is saying. Fulan is mushrik. What is the logical, right? Isn't this how logic works, or have I lost my mind? So then you would say, then if Fulan is mushrik and every mushrik goes to Jahannam, then Fulan is no, that's not how this works. No, this is not how this works at all. We do not have the right to do that ever. Not under any circumstances. The moment that you state that someone is going somewhere, you have put yourself in a degree of risk that is extremely scary. Because based on what did you say that? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sending this as a warning, as explanation. Nadhirun wa bashir. So people know. And then when the human being passes away, where they go, that is completely Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's business. It's not ours. We can only say where people are going if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself said, Fir'aun is going this way, Qawm Yunus are going that way. What is he saying it? Then we can say it. But besides, or the Prophet ﷺ came and told us, I saw fulan fi an-nar, and it has to be sahih, and maybe even higher than sahih, like Abu Jahl and Ubay ibn Khalaf and people like that. Otherwise, we have no right at all to say something like this. And it's important to kind of keep that in mind. He continues subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he says, Bal. And Bal is a sentence in English. Bal means, that wasn't really the problem though. Meaning, their problem wasn't the fact that لو شاء الرحمن ما عبدناهم. They know that's wrong. They know that it's just something that they made up. The real problem, the real reason that they will not change their habits, they won't stop worshipping idols with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even though they have no evidence that they should do that, is that they say this, بل قالوا إنا وجدنا آباءنا على أمة وإنا على آثارهم مهتدون. And then it's repeated almost word for word in the verse after it. The very famous and notorious problem that the human beings have always had is that it's just easier to keep status quo. It's just easier, especially if it roots back into your history, if it's a part of your legacy, if it's a part of your upbringing. Just easier to keep it as is, especially if it's beneficial. If it's financially beneficial, it's almost impossible to change. If there are habits and traditions that exist and they benefit financially, I dare you. I challenge you to change them if you can change them. That's what he was up against, alayhi salatu wasalam. There are we have a lot of traditions in our cultures that are actually not beneficial financially. They're harmful. And even those are extremely difficult to change. Trying to change a tradition, something that the fathers and forefathers have done, it's very hard to explain to people that what they did. And what they're saying here, إِنَّا وَجَدْنَا أَبَاءَنَا عَلَى أُمَّةٍ. We found our fathers and forefathers behaving in a certain way, living in a certain way. عَلَى أُمَّةٍ mean on a certain way of life, not specifically a religion. They didn't have a specific religion, just an accumulation or a collective number of traditions and habits that they had. Ummah is a way that they're living, they're part of a certain nation. وَإِنَّا عَلَى آثَارِهِمْ مُهْتَدُونَ. And we're going to be guided by whatever they did before. We're going to continue doing that. And then he says subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَكَذَلِكَ. And it's always been like this. وَكَذَلِكَ مَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِن قَبْلِكَ فِي قَرْيَةٍ مِّن نَذِيرٍ. We have never sent before you a warner to a town or to a group of people. إِلَّا قَالَ مُتْرَفُوهَا. Mutrafuha, and you put like a line under that word. Except the wealthy amongst them will say, إِنَّا وَجَدْنَا آبَاءَنَا عَلَى أُمَّةٍ وَإِنَّا عَلَى آثَارِهِمْ مُقْتَدُونَ. We found our parents, our fathers and forefathers behaving in a certain way, living in a certain way, and we're going to continue to follow that way. Muqtadun, we're going to just follow what they did. Why? Because the wealthy will say that. Because it's benefiting them. Why would they want to change this? Why would they want to even entertain a change of something that is bringing them money? Maybe because it's wrong. Maybe because it's not al-haq. Maybe because we know deep inside that this is not the right way to live. Maybe because others are being oppressed in the meantime or on the way. But if it's not us, then who cares? And that's again a very materialistic approach to life. And it existed back then, it still exists today. Hasn't gone. The problem is we can't celebrate that, these were problems of the Jahiliyyah, Allahu Akbar, they're gone. We really cannot do that at this point. We don't have the ability to celebrate the fact that these are gone. They're still there. We just just in different forms. It just looks a little bit different. It's a little bit of a different coating, and it just has a different scent and a different picture, but it's the same thing. We are still very much adhering to the traditions and the cultures of our forefathers, regardless of whether they are correct or not, regardless of this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked us to do or not. A really good example is our marriages and how marriages occur, and how difficult it is for someone to get married today. And how I'm watching younger people go through their 20s and 30s and mid-30s, and they still haven't gotten married, both male and female, because of how difficult we've made this. Because of culturally, that's how it is. Culturally, this is how it has to happen. This is what they need to do. This is the amount of money. This is the celebrations. This is what all these shurut that are not in the deen. The Prophet ﷺ zawwaja bil Quran, and he literally had people marry others just with how much Quran do you know? I know Surah Ali Imran. This you know it? Okay, then that's your mahar. You just teach her Ali Imran and the Allah hil anni. Go get married and have a life and have children. Because really this whole holding it back is senseless if you understand how societies function. Having people. What do you think people are doing until their 30s? If they hit puberty maybe 15 years ago. What, you think there's a button you can just turn it off? Are you not a human being like the rest of us? What are they doing for 15 years? Or is that a question we're not going to ask? If they don't tell us, we're not going to ask, and we're going to act like nothing's happening. We're going to draw a blind eye and just keep on moving forward, because I don't care what people do as long as my son and my daughter get exactly what I want for them. As long as the amounts of money are exactly the way I want, so that I can continue to parade myself in terms of prestige in front of people. How is that different than inna wajadna? How is it different? Explain to me how that is different. It isn't different. It's actually worse, because they did it and they really didn't have an alternative that was clear to them until the Prophet ﷺ came in. But you've had the alternative all your life. We've had it all the time. We know that it's wrong. We know that it's wrong. It's really interesting. Wallahi, it's so funny. I get to see these conversations occur, and it's just sometimes so ridiculous to me, but I don't know what to say. Like, I'll have the same person come and complain to me about muhur, because he's trying to get his son married. And then somehow he forgets that he ever talked to me, and 5-6 years later he comes and he's doing the exact same thing for his daughter. Like, literally the exact same thing. And I almost come to the point where I'm saying, it was 6 years ago. Yeah, Sheikh, I remember you said it. It wasn't even me. You said it. You're the one who was saying that this is not Islamic and they should, these people are, but you're doing the same thing. Why is it? Why? Because it's materialistic. Because it's based on that same unidimensional, extremely narrow-minded approach to the world that is based on materialism, based on money. And it's just not a good way to live. And this is what these people did. Inna wajadna aba'ana ala ummah. We found them living in a certain way. It works for us. We're not going to change it. But even if it's qala, this is what I'm saying. This is what the ayah says. Qala, the person who was sent, whoever, meaning this is every nadhir that ever came. Qala, awalaw ji'tukum bi'ahda mimma wajadtum alayhi aba'akum. How about, very muhtaram in the way they're offering it. How about, I show you something, I'll show you a way that is better, that has more guidance in it, that makes more sense than what you found your forefathers doing. So their answer is, قالوا إِنَّا بِمَا أُرْسِلْتُمْ بِهِ كَافِرٌ. Whatever it is that you're sent with, we don't believe it. Don't even tell us about it. We're not interested. What is this what you're sent with? We don't want it. Just point to it and I'll tell you that I don't believe in it. Just which one is it? It's exactly what Qawm Salih said to Salih. تَعْلَمُونَ أَنَّ صَالِحًا مُرْسَلٌ مِّن رَبِّهِ. Do you know that Salih is a prophet? قالوا إنا بما أرسل به. They said قالوا إنا بما أرسل به مؤمنون. The people, the du'afa are saying we believe. قالوا إنا بالذي آمنتم به كافرون. Whatever it is you believe in, we don't believe in. Just based on the fact that it's not going to be beneficial for us. Just based on the fact it's going to change the status quo and maybe take away some of our prestige, take away from some of our status, take away some of our ability to make money. We don't want it, regardless of whether it's correct or not. It's never, see, Islam was never refused based on a theological argument, basically. I have no evidence of that anywhere. I can't find it. I can't find a place where the person who was saying, I don't want this, was just based purely on a theological debate, saying, Tawheed just doesn't make sense to me. I never found that. Not in the Quran, not in the Seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. It was always attached to something else. And when I learned that, every time I have one of these discussions with somebody, I just kind of figure out what the hook is. The person who's struggling with the deen, where's the problem? Where's the problem? Because it's never the theology. There's something else. some personal experience, something that they heard, some practice that they are under the impression that is right or wrong, misled to understand. And once I find it, you can fix the problem. Once you find what it is, khalas, you fix it, because the theology itself is very simple. The concept of oneness of Allah subhanahu, the oneness of the Creator, the Supreme Being, that Supreme Being being beyond time and space, creating things in a way that is beyond our ability to comprehend, or that we'll spend the rest of our lives studying, looking at these cells and staring at the skies, figuring out how He did it, and only becoming in more awe of what He did subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's very simple, it's very beautiful, it's very meaningful. But really there's always some other niche, there's some other reason in the background. Once you figure it out, it's clear. قالوا إن بما أرسلتهم به كافرون. Immediately they discarded what this prophet is talking about before even hearing the argument itself. فانتقمنا منهم. So we punished them. فانظر كيف كان عاقبة المكذبين. So go walk the earth, take a look at the end result of those who choose to go against their best judgment and refuse to do the right thing just because it was not beneficial for them. And the takdeeb is important. I talked about this maybe 4 times in the last 3 days because it came up in all the surahs that I've been talking about. Takdeeb is a very specific word in the Quran. You see, a kafir is just someone who doesn't believe. We don't know why. That's what the kafir means. It's someone who just generally doesn't believe. You don't know why exactly, just don't believe. Mukadhib, no. Mukadhib is someone who does not believe, but during their lives saw that the way of Allah was the right way, was proper, but refused it for some self-interest reason, for some egocentric reason, for some self-benefit reason. They said, no, I don't want it, even though it was clear to them this is the right way to live. That's mukadhib, and that is a huge problem in the Quran, and those are the ones who actually get the highest level of punishment, because that someone who doesn't know any better, many of them will find forgiveness and mercy yawm al-qiyamah. Someone who Islam was just presented to them mistake in a wrong way, the person who brought the deen to them just did a really bad job of explaining it, misrepresented everything, and just made it seem something that it wasn't, and then they said, well, if that's what it is, I don't want it. Those people most likely will find forgiveness yawm al-qiyamah, because they didn't really become a kafir based on and this is the difference between kafir and dunya and then what it means yawm al-qiyamah. Because the kafir in front of you in dunya, you're just taking it on face value. They don't believe. You don't know why though, do you? You don't know why. So if you don't know why, you can't judge how they're going to be yawm al-qiyamah. You have no idea. You have no idea where they're going yawm al-qiyamah because you don't know what led to this moment. You don't know the backstory. You have to know the backstory in detail. Now, if you have some way to know the backstory, then go ahead, make your judgment. But I think that's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's business and only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's business, because no one else can know this stuff. So yes, face value, kafir, not a part of the ummah. There are certain laws that we have to follow in terms of how we deal with them. But what they are yawm al-qiyamah will be something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decrees on His own. I'm going to read just the parts of Ibrahim alayhi salam to 30, and then I'll let you all leave. وَإِذْ قَالَ إِبْرَاهِيمُ لِأَبِيهِ وَقَوْمِهِ إِنَّنِي بَرَاءٌ مِّمَّا تَعْبُدُونَ إِلَّا الَّذِي فَطَرَنِي فَإِنَّهُ سَيَهْدِينِ وَجَعَلَهَا كَلِمَةً بَاقِيَةً فِي عَقِبِهِ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْجِعُونَ بَلْ مَتَّعْتُ هَؤُلَاءِ وَآبَاءَهُمْ حتى جاءهم الحق ورسول مبين ولما جاءهم الحق قالوا هذا سحر وإنا به كافرون. And then the example of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Now, just to give you a bit of a backstory, in case, you probably know this, but I'll just kind of do it anyways. Ibrahim alayhi salam was born in a city called Ur, which is today it's in the southern part of Iraq, and is very close to a city called Nasiriyah today. But the actual city doesn't exist anymore. At least there's no people living there. But it was a huge, at the time, it was basically the New York of that time. If there was a city that people would go to as tourists, if visas existed back then getting in there would be very difficult, it would be very expensive. It was a very highly populated area. There was a lot of knowledge there. There was a lot of power there. And it was a place that the old Mesopotamia basically was centralized in that area. And that's where he was born, alayhi salam, Ibrahim. And in it, if you want to go look something up today, just for the fun of it, you can look up for the ziggurats, Zaqura in Arabic. And you can look them up. There are these huge buildings that many of them still exist, especially the one in Ur itself actually still exists. And these are buildings that are on mountains, and they're these huge monuments that were built at a time when the or at least for as far as we can tell, during Ibrahim's time, we didn't really have a lot of technology. So I don't know exactly how they built these huge buildings. And they were built for the gods because they believed that the gods lived up there. And then there was all these different types of gods, the god of the moon and the sun and rain and all these names. And some gods were easy to talk to, some gods were difficult to talk to. Some gods required a lot of sadaqat to be given to the clergymen. How convenient. Now, the only people who can go into these ziggurats on top of these mountains were the clergy. No one else was allowed in. So it was a very well played, corrupt, religious approach. Amazingly well played. And it worked for everyone. Worked for the kings. Worked for the clergy. It kept everyone controlled. People had to give a certain amount of money. It all went to to those who controlled these great palaces and to the people in authority and politics. And Ibrahim alayhi salam just saw that and saw this is not faith. This is just a rig. This is rigged. This is a game. You're a bunch of liars. It's obvious that you're lying. It's obvious that you're using this for your own benefit. This is all this is nonsense. He didn't like it. With قال إبراهيم لأبيه وقومه إنني براء مما تعبدون. I am completely. I have nothing to do with this. I inaugurate myself from having anything to do with what you worship. And this is of course where he was born alayhi salam. So this is where Ibrahim began his life and left. He never went back. إِلَّا الَّذِي فَطَرَنِي, except the one who created me or gave me that or began my creation. فَإِنَّهُ سَيَهْدِينَ, indeed he will continue to guide me. They didn't like that, so they kicked him out. But listen to what the verses say. I love this verse. It's such a beautiful one. قال وَجَعَلَهَا كَلِمَةً بَاقِيَةً فِي عَقِبِهِ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْجِعُونَ. But he left those words behind him in the ears and minds of the people, so that maybe they'll find their way back from wherever they are. They're lost in this mess of a way of thought that is so corrupt, that is so materialistic. Again, it's all about the qarabin. They bring bring the best of what you got for the gods, because the gods will give you matar and will give you rain and give you barakah and give you children. And of course, everyone just takes. Not like this sadaqah is going to the poor and the needy, is going to the corrupt clergy and into the kings and whoever's in politics. They have it nicely webbed around their personal interests. And Ibrahim alayhi salam saw that, and he talked about it, and he went through that whole ordeal that you know about, where he broke a couple of them and left the axe on the big one, and they said, "What is this?" And they refused when he finally pointed out to them, "Why are you worshipping something that doesn't speak to you?" ثُمَّ نُكِسُوا عَلَى رُؤُوسِهِمْ. But they refused. نُكِسُوا عَلَى رُؤُوسِهِمْ, meaning they refused the logic, and they regressed back to what they knew was wrong, just because they didn't want to admit that they were wrong, and because there was too much at stake to actually admit that this was the wrong way. And they threw him in a fire, and he had to leave alayhi salatu wasalam. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَجَعَلَهَا كَلِمَةً بَاقِيَةً فِي عَقِبِهِ. He left those words in their ears as a seed. Hopefully one day they'll find their way back with them. And I think this is really what we have to do. This is what I believe is our main obligation as Muslims, performing da'wah. Just leave something good behind. You're trying to perform da'wah and they're not listening to you. Just leave kalimatan baqiyah. Just leave something fi aqibik behind you when you leave, when you can't go. You never know. You never know, wallahi. I've seen it so many times in my life. That's why I love this verse, that I think it's something you should take seriously. Wallahi, sometimes, especially when you work with teenagers and whatnot, it can be very draining, and you can get so frustrated because there's just lack of anything, and they're not committed. They won't listen. They don't respect anything you're saying. You're committing your time. You're putting your effort. You're trying to talk about stuff, and they just play around and mock sometimes a lot of what you do. And sometimes and the people that I feel there's no hope in, and this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ta'deeb from Allah. This is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches me lessons, and He humbles me, reminds me that I know nothing of what I speak. And people that I look at and say, this person will alhamdulillah, he doesn't come anymore to the masjid. Something in my heart with it, I can't handle talking to this person yet another day. But then a few years later, this person comes back with a completely different mentality and a different approach. And they recall certain things that you said at a certain point, and it humbles you. Because you remind a guy, I had all these bad assumptions of this person in my life. It was a child. It was a teenager. They don't know what they're doing. But it's just a mistake on my behalf. But if you say the right word, you say the kind stuff, and you say what needs to be said, and you offer advice that is genuine, and you're trying to help somebody, even if if it doesn't seem to you that they're taking any of it in, they're not absorbing any of it, just say it. كَلِمَةً بَاقِيَةً فِي عَقِبِكَ, something just that you can leave behind. لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْجِعُونَ, they may find their way back one day because of a good word that you said. And that's really all we're supposed to do. Just offer people, just leave something good. Leave a seed of khair. And if you're kicked out, if you're thrown out, that's fine. Just leave a seed of khair because they may find their way back because of that seed that you left. And that is exactly what Ibrahim alayhi salam did. And that's why he is the Imam. And that's why he is brought here in this surah, only a couple of verses just talking about him, pointing out to the extremely materialistic approach of the people that he spoke to, but how he dealt with it, which is this way. You just have to, even if they're not listening, just بَلْ مَتَّعْتُ هَؤُلَاءِ وَآبَاءَهُم. See, the problem wasn't that. The problem was مَتَّعْتُ هَؤُلَاء. They were given too much wealth. They had too much money. They became too comfortable. وَآبَاءَهُم, and their parents, they were embedded in wealth. They had inherited so much wealth. حتى جاءهم الحق ورسول مبين ولما جاءهم الحق قالوا هذا سحر وإنا به كافرون. They were so comfortable that when they were given a Rasul, when the truth came to them, and the Prophet who was very clear, who has a clear mentality, has a clear perspective, clear worldview, clear message, they just said هذا سحر. When it came to them, when the haqq came to them, they were so wealthy and they were so comfortable, and they said هذا سحر. This is just this is heresy, or this is magic, or this is wizardry, or whatever they want to call it. وَإِنَّا بِهِ كَافِرُونَ, and we refuse it. Another example of a unidimensional, materialistic approach is something that they're listening to based on financial best interest. I will stop with that, and then tomorrow, inshallah, we'll read a verse. I just ask you to do it on your own today. Read number 31. Think about it. And tomorrow, inshallah, we'll talk about another example, probably one of the most powerful examples in this surah regarding this problematic way of thought. Subhanakallah wa bihamdik, shadu la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Forgive me for taking too much time. Barakallahu feekum, jazakumullahu khairan.